Welcome to the Elite Tennis Podcast. I am Mike Baugh, and with us tonight we have Lisa Goodman Stone. Lisa, welcome, and how are you doing this evening?
I'm great, and thanks, Mike. It's nice to see your face. I haven't seen you in a long time, just virtually. So,
Well, yeah, so I think the last time I saw you, we were in New York at the WTCA conference.
yeah, that is it.
And so how have you been?
I've been good. I can't complain. I moved from Atlanta to Orange County, California in October, and I moved out here to be closer to my kids. I have two of my kids are in Los Angeles and one's up in the Bay Area. And it's just been great. And, being quarantined right now, there are lots worse places I could be stuck at home. So, no complaints.
So let's get started with you. How did you originally get involved with tennis?
I grew up playing. I grew up in a family where you played tennis. My dad was a top junior player growing up he grew up in New Orleans, and he wound up playing collegiately at Tulane. And the Tulane team won the national championship while my dad was there. And my dad is 82 now and still plays singles with a guy that he's been playing since they were in like the 11 and unders back then. So they met as children. They went all through juniors together. They played together at Tulane. They've been playing each other ever since. They're both 82, have no knees, and it's unbelievable to watch the competitive spirit in these two guys. They're hilarious. Still have these gorgeous strokes. So I'm the oldest of three kids. All three of us were taught the game. We were expected to do certain things growing up, and having a sport was one of those things. And so my dad introduced all of us to tennis. We each played, relatively competitively. I wasn't that good. I played just in Louisiana and um, some sectional stuff, but mostly just in the state. And then walked away from tennis for a really long time after my freshman year of high school. I played on my high school team my freshman year, and then that was it. I didn't pick up a racket again until my youngest was born, and we were living in Atlanta. And as you probably know, ALTA, the
Oh, it's
Atlanta Lawn
huge.
Tennis Association, is massive. When you move to Atlanta, people start knocking on your door, and the first question is, "How level are you?" So they start recruiting you pretty heavy the second you get to town. And so I played Alta for, moved out here, and actually I'm still a part of my Alta teams in Atlanta. You know, in case I ever get to go back there during season, and if Alta starts back up again, I can come in and play as an alternate or whatever. But yeah, so tennis is in my blood.
Oh, that's great. One of my friends, so I'm from Southern Indiana with a town of 600 people with no stoplights. And one of my friends from back in that town plays Alta or played Alta. And I actually came down one time and visited her one weekend. And she was like showing me all these events and stuff and people playing and all the everything. And it was amazing, all these people that were playing. It was beautiful and just the camaraderie and the atmosphere and everything was great.
And the competition, it is
Oh, the competition
cutthroat.
was great.
Yeah.
So you started playing again when your first was born,
I won my
and
last one actually. After
oh,
I started playing once he went to preschool, because I was home raising kids before that. I have three kids. And so, yeah, once my youngest went off to preschool, I started playing Alta in the neighborhood and got
okay,
back involved that way. Yeah.
okay, and then so when do your kids now play tennis, and did they?
So all three of them were exposed. They all had lessons growing up. I have two girls and a boy. My oldest two, my girls, took lessons in the neighborhood, and, it was very social and just very lighthearted and fun. And they liked it okay, but they didn't get the bug at all. My son, who's my youngest, he got the bug. at a very young age. And he, all my kids grew up playing multiple sports and having music lessons and doing all different kinds of things. But he figured out pretty early that tennis was his thing. So, yeah.
That's good. So explain to me, what is Parenting Aces?
Parenting Aces is a website, a podcast, social media platforms, YouTube channel for parents of junior and college tennis players. And we are here to help parents kind of navigate through the whole tennis journey, whether your child is just getting started in the sport or whether they're shifting gears and really ramping up their competition, or whether they're just playing recreationally and you want to understand how the process works. We're here. And Parenting Aces started because my son, who I just mentioned, was getting pretty serious about tennis, and I really didn't know how to help him navigate to get him to the places he wanted to reach with his tennis, which mainly was playing Division I college tennis. That was his big goal. And the process was so complicated and there were so many different levels of tournaments. It was completely different from what I'd grown up knowing. And I was seeking help, some guidance. Who can tell me what tournaments he needs to be playing? Who can tell me, the best coaches around and what he should be doing on a daily basis? And, what about homeschooling? It's what I'm hearing from everybody. And all these questions kept coming up, but there were no answers anywhere. And I was getting really, really frustrated and got very lucky, stumbled on a Facebook group, actually, the US Junior Tennis Legends group, and started posting all my questions on that Facebook group and started getting some incredible information, because not only were the people in that group former junior champions themselves, but many of them were now coaches, junior coaches or college coaches, or they were parents of kids who had come through the process. And so I was just getting some unbelievable information. And one of them eventually said, Lisa, if you have these questions, I'm sure there are a lot of other parents out there that have similar questions. Why don't you throw all this stuff up on a website? So I was like, all right, I can do that. So that's Parenting Aces. Here we are, 9 years later. So.
Well, and the thing too, and what I found with talking with coaches, because I speak and work with a lot of coaches as well, is there's this triangle. There's the coach, there's the player, and then there's the parent.
Yep.
And oftentimes it's one-sided and it goes coach, player, coach, player, coach, player, and the parent's kind of left out. Yeah. And it doesn't get that connection. Or it's two-sided and it goes player, parent, player, parent, player, parent, and it goes player, coach, and it doesn't go coach, parent, and there's that lack of communication.
The disconnect,
there. Yeah. And I think one thing you've really done well is kind of bridge that communication between the coaches and the parents. And the other thing too is sometimes coaches don't know. And they don't want to say they don't know.
Yeah.
Because there's there's a lot of coaches that don't know. Especially in the last, 5 years when it comes down to 10 and under tennis, youth progression pathway. I've been getting a lot of phone calls from, academy coaches that run academies. And they're like, Mike, what the hell is a youth progression pathway? How come my kid who's playing yellow ball at 7 years old can't get into this tournament? And I'm like, well, because they haven't done this, and this, and it's mandatory, and you have to do this. And I think one thing that your website has done a really good job of is you've been able to help educate and provide a resource and provide a gap in education that coaches that may not understand, and kind of fill that gap, and for parents that may not understand to know where. And you've really done a really fantastic job. And that's really where I was first turned on to your information, because with social media now, it's you know, through the tennis forums with We Coach Tennis and Tennis House and all the other ones, that there's so many.
So many.
So many. And people share articles and everything, and people comment, and people can be accessible, and the networking. I knew who you were before I even met you through all the comments and the forums and stuff. It was great to finally meet you in New York this year.
Well, and ditto. I mean, same on my end, but yeah, I mean, there's so much information out now, and that's, I mean, it's good and it's bad, right? Because there's a lot of really good information out there, but there's also a lot of mediocre and just flat out bad information out there as well. And I think, you know, it's becoming really challenging for parents to kind of sift through all of it, and for coaches as well. You know, talking about the coaches not knowing this terminology and things that are going on. I mean, tennis, I feel like every 2 years we get a changing of the guard at USTA. It's just the way USTA is set up. And the new guard comes in and they have plans and things they want to implement. And so just when you get used to or comfortable with you know, a way of tournament structure or a way of rankings or any of that stuff, the youth progression that you mentioned, it gets changed, and it's really difficult to keep up. I mean, it's difficult for me, and I'm on social media all day long trying to keep up with all this stuff, and you know, I miss stuff all the time. So it's really difficult, and I think bridging that gap, as you said, between the parent and the coach really has been my goal, and kind of at the forefront of my mission is helping the parents and the coaches be better communicators with each other, but also helping the parents be better with their players, with their kids, and you know, understanding the challenges that their children are going through, and being a support system for them rather than butting heads all the time. So you know, I'm just here to help, and it's one of those things that my role has really shifted over the years. I mean, when I first started Parenting Aces, my son was a freshman in high school, and we were hardcore into the junior tournament scene. And, you know, every week, I mean, there was something going on, and, you know, we were figuring out nutrition stuff and fitness stuff and scheduling, and does he play ITFs, and does he play opens? And, you know, there were all these things going on, and I had so much information to write about, right? Because I was living the life at that point. Once he went off to college, things really shifted. And at that point, people were like, well, what's going to happen to Parenting Aces? Your son's done with juniors. And I'm like, well, you know, I'm not real sure what's going to happen with Parenting Aces. Let's just kind of see where things go at this point. And as it turned out, my son had a very tumultuous college tennis experience. I took some time away from writing about tennis. I was writing about nutrition and fitness and all these other things, but not writing about the tennis, because I just was in the throes of a lot of negative stuff going on with my kid. And then he eventually, after his sophomore year of college, gave up tennis altogether and really did a big pivot that year. And so then again, it's like, all right, well, now my kid's not playing at all anymore. Now what's my role in the sport? What is Parenting Aces going to morph into next? And thankfully, everything's just kind of happened. You know, I haven't really had to spend a lot of time wondering and worrying about it. The next things just happened to fall into my lap. So yeah, I'm still here.
That's great. And I think the other thing too is, I know from when I went through my own college recruiting process, and I'm sure the same thing to you, and when you go through that and then helping players go through their college recruiting process, it changes, it evolves.
Yeah.
You know, when I first started coaching, there was no thing as a UTR.
Right.
You know, when I went through my college recruiting process, there was no YouTube. You had to dub tapes on a VCR.
Yeah.
Okay. So you don't understand this. Like, I was telling one of my players, I made a recruiting video for him, and it was like, to bring out the GoPro, you bring out the editing stuff. I was flying home to Indiana the next day. I edited it on the plane.
Right.
And I sent him the link when I landed, and I was like, here you go. And I'm going back and I'm thinking, and I showed my parents the video that I made for this kid and for this player, and they go, this is a lot better than what you made for yourself. I'm like, yeah, it is, because this is 2020, and it's not, 1999, 2000 anymore. So, a big difference 20 years makes. But,
Sure.
even going back 10 years,
yeah,
it's a big difference.
And my son's 1 year out of college now. He graduated last summer. And, the kids that are in the recruiting pool right now, their experience is so different from what his was 5 years ago. So it's continued to evolve for sure. And keeping up with what's happening. Sometimes I feel like I'm in this loop, in terms of interviews I do or articles I write. I'm like, God, I wrote that 5 years ago, or, I did this topic 2 years ago, but I have to keep going back to it because, as you said, things keep changing so rapidly.
So I think the big thing that has really changed is, I call the trifecta, the three questions that every coach asks every player. And sometimes there's a fourth question depending on the home country. And that's the SAT, the GPA, and the UTR.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's not in that order. And it probably should be in that order, but it's not. And then the fourth one is the TOEFL score, depending on their home country.
But that's changing now too, because with COVID-19, a lot of schools now are not requiring SAT. They're waiving that requirement. And so things are going to look very different for the 2020, 2021 recruiting class. And we don't know what that is yet.
Now the schools may be waiving the SAT, but is the NCAA clearinghouse waiving the SAT for the eligibility center?
That I don't know for sure, but I have seen some, and I've heard coaches talk about the fact that they're no longer requiring SAT. So I'm not positive if NCAA has formed a policy on that. You probably know more than I do on that.
So I haven't looked, but generally, and this is a broad paintbrush statement here, tennis players are generally smart and normally have high GPAs, so they don't have to worry about having an SAT score that high.
Yeah.
So if your SAT score is, or if your GPA is pretty high, then you normally don't have to worry about your SAT for the clearinghouse.
Right. But I'm guessing, if the colleges themselves aren't requiring the standardized test, I don't know how the NCAA could require it, especially with test dates being canceled, So things are going to look, again, it's going to be a whole different landscape for this upcoming senior class, that'll be entering school, whatever school looks like in the fall.
And we're also talking about the NCAA. So
yeah. Well, and I will say, if somebody's watching and has a kid getting ready to go through recruiting or is in the midst of it, your best resource for everything with your college recruiting is the NCAA Eligibility Center. And I can tell you, when my son was going through it, I was on the phone with those people all the time, and they were so incredibly helpful because it's their rules that run the game here, and it's their hoops you have to jump through in order to be eligible to be recruited. So why not just call them and have them say to you, yes, you need this, no, you don't need that, and get it straight from the horse's mouth. So I will say every single person that I ever spoke with there was incredibly generous with their time and their knowledge. And if they didn't have an answer for me, they would get it from me and get right back to me. So I want to give props to them and really recommend, if somebody's going through recruiting, use them as a resource because they are super, super helpful.
So talking about resources, as you're talking to other parents and other players that are going through the recruiting process, rising freshmen, sophomores, juniors, what are some other resources that you recommend parents use to help them along the way?
Well, I have a gajillion articles and podcasts on parentingaces.com, so on recruiting. So
Okay.
I would say, you know, as a jumping off point, go back and listen to some of the podcasts I've done with the ITA, with college coaches, with college recruiters, recruiting services. There's so much good information that we've kind of accumulated and archived over the years. And I'm always talking to people about the recruiting process. So there's always new information being, you know, downloaded onto the site or uploaded to the site or however that works. But so that's a great jumping off point. But also in terms of your kid trying to figure out what's the best fit college tennis wise for them, I love UTR's tool where you can go in and search schools by UTR. So based on whatever your UTR is at a certain time, you can search the colleges, every single division, to see what UTR is in their lineup, their top 6 players, and see what's a good fit for you. I think they call it their college fit tool or something like that. And I think that is so helpful in kind of getting that first big list together. You know, these are the schools where I can play in the lineup. You know, my UTR is in line with what they're looking for. And then you can dig deeper and find out, is my GPA in line with what they need? Is my SAT in line with that? Or whatever other factors, you know, you're looking at. But I think that's a great starting point for devising a list of schools. And then really, you've got to do the work. And I know everybody's always looking for an easy out with this. You know, let me hire a consultant. Let me, you know, pay this person to do it for me. I will tell you from my own experience with my son, the junior player needs to drive the recruiting process. They
Yes.
need to be the one at the helm here. And the parents need to set some parameters. Every family is different. So if there's a financial parameter that you need to set for your child, then do that. If you feel very strongly about a geographic parameter, meaning, you know, you want your kid within driving distance of home, or you want them, you know, in a certain part of the country where you have family, then set that parameter. If you have certain academic requirements that you want for your child's college experience, set that parameter. And then once you've done that, take the step back and let the player start doing the work. They need to do the research, put together the list of schools that they're interested in. They need to, as early as possible, do unofficial visits at campuses. And that doesn't have to be anything formalized. It just means if you're in a city for a tournament already, or you're in a city for training, or just visiting grandma and grandpa, go visit the schools in that area. Let your child get a sense of what the campuses feel like, what, you know, what a college town looks like versus a school in a huge urban area.
Yeah.
You know, expose them to all these different things starting early, and go visit not just Division I schools, go visit Division II, Division III. Some kids really are not ready for four-year university when they graduate high school. Junior colleges are phenomenal stepping stones for certain kids, right? I mean, from a tennis standpoint, from a maturity standpoint, from an economic standpoint, they make so much sense for certain kids. So don't rule anything out just because you have in your mind that D1 is, you know, the end all be all. I can tell you from experience, it is not. There are some great Division I programs and there's some not so great ones. And there's some great Division II, III NAIA JUCO programs and some not so great ones.
Yeah.
So you have got to do your research, and what works for one kid may not necessarily work for another. So even if you have multiple children in a family, the recruiting process may look very different for them.
Oh, absolutely. One thing that I think it's really great to hear though is the kid driving the bus there.
For sure.
And I think one turnoff, and I've had a lot of friends that I grew up playing with that are now college coaches.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that they've actually said is if the parents are too involved, that is a huge red flag.
Yeah.
Because once the kid gets on campus, the parents aren't going to be there. The coaches recruit the kid, not the player. Or
Right.
the coaches recruit the player, not the parents.
Right.
And that's one thing is if the coach has to deal with all the parents and the emails and that, one, it could be depending on the rules that year with the NCAA.
Yeah, because those change just like USTA rules change.
Those change. So it could be a
More
recruiting
often.
violation.
Yeah.
You know, if there's too much contact, it could be a recruiting violation.
Yeah.
So they got to be, hey, listen, stop calling me, stop doing this because you're going to get me fired with the compliance issue.
Yeah.
So that could be an issue. Or the fact that once they become a student athlete at the university is how much of a pain is this parent going to be for the coach? You know, the kid, most likely, the player is most likely now going to be an adult once they're a student.
Right.
The college coach doesn't want to have to put up with the parent going to be down there. I mean, yeah, communication may be nice here and there, but they're working with adults now.
Well, in theory,
it's here and there. It's here and there, but they don't want to have to babysit
the parents. For sure. But I will say that, you know, the majority of kids going to college their first year are somewhere between 17 and 19 years old. And, you know, they may be adults in the eyes of the law, but especially for boys, they're not. You know, they've still got a lot of maturing going on and to come for many years. So there's a fine line there, but what you're saying is absolutely right. The coaches don't want to recruit a kid and have the parents so super involved that the coach can't do his or her job, right? So we as parents have to step back and let that college coach be the coach and know that we can trust that coach to have our child's best interest at heart as they continue to grow and develop and mature during their college career. The flip side of that, though, is there are times where parents do need to step in and where there are issues, you know, that are beyond what a 17, 18, 19-year-old is capable of handling appropriately. Yes. And so I would say to the college coaches, it's really important that you keep an open line of communication with the parents. Not that you want to have phone calls or emails with them daily or even weekly, but, you know, during the season, I know my son transferred, so his coach sophomore year was unbelievable at sending regular emails out to the team parents. We knew exactly what was going on. We knew where they were traveling, how they were getting there, where they were staying. I mean, he was great at doing that. And as a parent who was across the country from my kid, I appreciated that so much because he took the initiative. It meant that I could take the step back and just trust that my kid was in good hands.
Yes. And I think about the times that I know coaches that I don't think they've ever contacted some parents.
Yeah.
You know, I know that there are coaches out there that have never called or messaged some parents ever in their coaching career.
Yeah, so, I'm sure. And there are parents that are okay with that. And I get that. You know, if you're the parent that's okay with that, great. I mean, that's wonderful. I was not that parent. I just needed the touch point, you know, just give me a little smidge of what's happening, because as the parent of a boy, I certainly wasn't getting a lot of information from my son. I just, we had a great relationship and we talked, but I wasn't getting details. So it was really nice to have that communication. I appreciated it. And what it did also is it fostered a really nice relationship between all the parents on the team, because he connected us as well to one another. So we could talk and leave the coach out of it, leave our kids out of it, and just talk amongst ourselves, which was super nice.
So I have a 14-year-old son. My
I'm
last
sorry.
conversation, yeah. I know exactly what you mean by. So how's school?
Communication. Yeah.
How's school? Good.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Okay. But that's not even the question I asked. Okay.
Yeah.
What are you doing right now? Playing video games?
Yeah.
All right, good. All right, see you later. Take care.
Yeah.
Are you still breathing? Yeah, I think so. Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah. So absolutely. I have my nicknames for him too.
Yeah.
So adolescent teenage boys or teenage boys. Adolescent teenage girls, on the other hand, are adolescent teenage girls.
Oh yeah. I have two daughters too, so yeah.
And they have their own ways and they go through their own stages. And that is one reason why I love what they're doing with the WTCA and focusing on not just women coaching, but coaching women.
Right.
And
it's a different animal.
It's a different animal. And one thing I think is important is, even though we talk about coaching males and coaching females, I think it's one thing to realize is we need to coach individuals.
Yes.
And it's one place to start with coaching males and coaching females, but I think it's really, really, really important to really get to the point of coaching the individual, and really go there. Yeah. So it's a good good starting point to go there, but really full it down to working there. So because people are just individual. So you may have a 17-year-old boy, but the things you need to do with him may actually be what you need to do typically with a 15-year-old girl due to behaviors or whatever. Not saying that's good or bad, because good or bad are very subjective words.
Right. It just is. It just is.
Or you may have a 17-year-old girl and you may have to coach her more like a 15-year-old boy.
Right.
It's very, you never know. It's individualistic there.
Well, and that's what I think makes tennis so tricky for a lot of people, is because every single player's experience is different. There's not a single answer that fits everybody's experience, right? And I think that's what can be very frustrating with our sport is, it sure would be nice to be able to go online and say, okay, my kid is 10 years, 7 months. These are the tournaments that he should be playing. This is the amount of food he should be consuming. This is the amount of fitness, and these are specific exercises. But you can't do that.
You can't do that because, well, that's the thing is development is individual.
Physical and emotional development.
Physical, mental, emotional, biological. You have so many different avenues of development, and how you treat these players and athletes, you just can't do that. So there's no one way. So I mean, honestly, I keep a lot of my opinions of what the national governing body does directly to the nationally governed body. My outward opinion is, unless I have a solution, I keep my opinion to myself. That's what it is. Solutions, not problems.
I'm with you.
But the whole thing is, if we're looking at doing things for the good of the game, then let's look at, what is good, and that's one reason I really like UTR as far as competition wise, because it is level. I mean, when you've got a 5.0 player, it doesn't matter if they're 14 or 18, they're
Right.
a 5.0 level player. So I could take a 5.0 level 14-year-old and match them up against a 5.0 level 44-year-old, and
Yeah.
they will have a competitive level match.
Yeah.
And I think that's really key, especially when you're looking at participation numbers and you need to, boost your participation up, and you can't because of age divisions.
Well, and I think,
So
in the wake of COVID-19, we're going to see, for the short term at least, more localized play.
yeah,
It's just got to happen that way, because not enough people are going to be willing to get on a plane and stay in a hotel and have to eat in restaurants to go travel for tournaments yet. I mean, hopefully we'll get back there. So in the short term, why not set up these level-based events? And, let's say you live in a community where your kid is the only elite player in his or her age group. And so you travel all the time to tournaments so your child can get good competition. But what if maybe there's an adult in your community that would be a great matchup for your kid, or a former college player, or even a current college player that would be a great matchup for your kid, but you're never going to connect with that person unless somebody creates that opportunity or you create it yourself. If you haven't networked and identified these people in your community that would be a good matchup for your child, these UTR events are a no-brainer kind of way to do that, right? And maybe you're going to come in contact with people that, oh my gosh, your child can go play tennis and you're not having to pay for them to play. They're just going out and having a great hitting session with somebody at their level, on a local court that maybe you're paying $3 for the court fees, but it's a way for them to get out and play the game and really hone their skills. One of the things I remember, just from growing up playing tennis, having a private tennis lesson when I was a kid was something that, like, that was a birthday present, right? Like, this just wasn't something we did. We, we got on the telephone, no texting back then, got on the phone, called up our buddies, who's going to be around this afternoon, you want to hit? And then we would all ride our bikes to the courts and meet up and take turns playing each other, and we go swim and then come back and play and whatever. Kids don't do that anymore. And this is one of the things that I have been a big proponent of since I started Parenting Aces, because I think it's really important, again, to give the game back to the kids, right? Why should we parents or you coaches be the only ones arranging their tennis? They need to take some ownership of that. And my goodness, they have every communication method at their fingertips to get a hold of their buddies. So I think one of the positives that is going to come out of this whole COVID-19 crazy time is maybe a return to that a little bit, where kids are taking the onus on themselves. I mean, we're already seeing it where, parents are hitting with their kids because the kids can't go to the club. The club's not open. And so we're getting back to some of those kind of old school ways of introducing and growing the sport, which I think is a good thing.
Well, and that's one thing when I see my players come out to the courts on their own, I make a big deal of it.
It's huge.
It's huge.
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be, but I make a big deal of it because it's so exciting to see them outside of practice, practicing. And I feel like Allen Iverson's shouting about practice, but it's a great thing.
They're taking initiative. Typically when they do that, they're having way more fun than they would be having in a group drill or a lesson. Maybe somebody's got their music playing, they're kind of putzing around on the side changes, joking around and, challenging each other. Maybe they're trying trick shots, things they wouldn't normally do because they would feel like they were wasting the coach's time if they pulled that stuff during a drill session or something.
I feel that's where they develop their style.
Yeah.
They develop fundamentals in practice and they develop their style on their own.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's really huge. And not to drop any names or who said anything, but there's some statistics out there saying that, you know, in this country, our players don't play enough, and like enough sets. We don't play enough practice sets.
Right.
And when you're doing organized drills and organized play, you can only play so many practice sets because of the structure that the coach is under to do the lessons and drills.
Well, and they're limited by the number of courts they have, and
number of courts.
Yeah.
And if you are, you know, up north and you are in a 3 or 4 court indoor facility and you have 20 kids that you're trying to fit in, there's no way that you're going to be able to fit match play in for those players unless you schedule match play for certain times on like a 1 day or whatever, and you're not getting those sets in.
Right.
Even down here in our sunnier areas, Georgia, California, Florida, sometimes we have to, you know, push them one step further to set up those match plays, because they don't understand that they need to actually play matches, or that they can play matches outside of
Right.
a structured tournament or whatever. Because sometimes I talk to players and they're like, oh, I didn't even know that I could play a match outside of a tournament.
I mean, I wish every single junior coach would set up a ladder for their players, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, that's what I grew up with. And you had to play X number of matches, I guess, over the course of the month, or I don't remember what the details were, but you know, it was hanging on like the wall of the pro shop. So every time you went in, everybody could see who's played whom, who beat whom, and it was a big deal, but it fostered that sense of competition among the kids themselves rather than it being an external thing. We kind of built that among ourselves, like, oh my gosh, she just beat her. Oh my gosh, I've got to play her now and see if I can beat her, because last time we played, she beat me. And, you know, it was just a whole like intrinsic way of building this competitive structure that had nothing to do with a lesson. It had nothing to do with a paid practice. It was just us getting together on our own and getting out there and battling. It was fun.
Yeah. So what do you think, and obviously you've seen some of the statistics now, that the attrition rate for tennis, with the reason that some of the one of the reasons that they have entry level events, the non-elimination formats, is to try to help players feel more comfortable getting started with tournaments. They actually have helped get players to stay in the game because they're not losing first and first, and they're playing more events and they're staying in longer. Those have helped. And I believe it's a culture change. I believe that, you know, 20, 30 years ago, if I was to go and play a tournament and lose first and first, and then I say I want to quit playing tennis, my parents would be like, you just played one tournament and you lost first and first. Like, what the hell's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, you only did it once. Like, play like 5 or 6. Like, see what can happen. Like, play for a year. Now it's like you lose first and first and you're like, oh, I suck. And you're like, oh, okay, well, let's go try something else.
Right.
Like the amount of time that people give up is very short now. And if you don't have success very early, especially if you play people very successful early on, they don't factor that in. What are I mean, you've been around and see and talk to a lot of parents and coaches and things. What do you kind of see in the culture now and that change over the last years?
I mean, I don't think it's a matter of losing first and first, and that's why people are leaving. I think it's that the whole system of junior competition in this country, and I don't have experience of junior comp in other countries other than what I read, so I don't have direct experience, but I have direct experience here. It's not a fun system. It's grueling. And it's, I think we see so much burnout because we've made it all about the ranking, right? When I was coming up, the rankings came out once a year in a book that was mailed to you. So you had no idea all year long, nor did you care all year long what your ranking was. Now, let me say the top 10 in each age group, we all knew who they were. Like, it was evident who the top players were. But for the rest of us, it just didn't matter, and you saw your ranking when it came out, and it was what it was. And maybe you aimed to have a higher ranking the next year. Maybe you didn't care, whatever. Now, every time a kid plays a match, they're checking their rankings, their UTR, their TRN. I mean, we've become obsessed with results and numbers as opposed to becoming engrossed in the journey of becoming a tennis player.
Yeah.
Getting good at tennis, right? And enjoying it just for the sheer fact that you're getting better every time you step on a court. Now it's all about what's my ranking, what's my rating, what's my stars, blah, blah, blah. And I get it. I get that that's important. And I get that, it's nice to be able to see how you compare to your peers. But the best way to see how you compare to your peers is to go out and play against them. Right? I mean, the racket and the ball speak volumes. So
you don't play it on paper. You got to play it on the court.
That's right. That's
I mean,
right.
If you play it on paper, then why even play them? Why play the match at all?
Well, right. So I think that I don't think that people are quitting after one tournament because they lost. I think they're quitting after one tournament because the experience of playing the tournament wasn't a positive one. And so we have to change the culture of junior tournaments. And I think that's what USTA is trying to do with this new 7-level system that they're rolling out in 2021, where we will have those level 7 entry-level events that are all about having a fun, positive experience at a tennis tournament. And kids can start there and they can stay at that level if that's what they want. But for the ones that want to move up through the levels and, have higher aspirations, there will be a structure for that too. And with the understanding that the higher level tournaments are going to be less about the fun factor and more about the performance factor and the competition and, winning and earning ranking points. But at the beginning, it shouldn't be about that. Whether you're beginning at age 5 or you're beginning at age 10 or you're beginning at age 15, it doesn't matter. When you begin, it should be fun for you. And there should be something that, helps you latch onto the sport and want to come back. So
we talked a little bit ago about some of the Facebook groups.
Yeah.
And I hope you know where I'm going to go with this. In some of the Facebook groups, there's this old guard.
Yeah.
And they seem to be guarding the historical way that tennis used to be and ignoring how busy schedules are for people, ignoring how people live their lives nowadays, ignoring that, well, people may have brothers and sisters that have to do this and this and this, ignoring that, it may just not work for a family to do 4 matches in 2 days or whatever, or even for a club to host a full event now. Mm-hmm. And they're anti-short sets, they're anti-short scoring, they're anti-third set tie break, which has been around now for a long time. So as far as these, like you said, it's not going to be every event that they're changing. the big events, the level ones, the level twos, the level threes, they're going to be the traditional events. The level
Right.
fours are going to be traditional events. The sixes and the sevens are the local ones. The ones are going to have, so the level one is going to be the national championships.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be the Kalamazoo and the San Diego. And that's going to be the 100% of the points. And then a level 7 is going to be 1% of a level 1.
Yeah.
And you have to win a ton of those points. In fact, there's no way you can even compare.
Right.
Like, there's no way you can even do it.
Right.
And so a level 7 is going to be a half-day event, and compared to what level 1 is, which is basically almost a week-long event. So
right.
With the half-day event you have with the level 7, you've obviously got the short scoring and stuff. What I'm saying is, I'm setting up this question is, what would you have to say to the old guard, so to speak, the social media haters of changing the scoring, the ones that want to protect we want to play full 3 sets at all times because this is how kids learn resiliency, and no matter what we do, this is the way it should be done. What do you have to say about that?
So first of all, I am part of that old guard. However, I think there's room for both things. And I think that's where our society is now. We have to make room for lots of options if we want our sport to remain relevant and to grow. So I hate short scoring. I hate no ad scoring. I hate the 3rd set tiebreaker. When I play my matches, we play full 3 sets, regular scoring, and I'm 57 years old. And if I can handle it, a 14-year-old, highly trained athletic kid can certainly handle it. So I am part of that. At the same time, I understand that that is not appropriate at every level of our sport anymore. And if we want to bring new kids into the sport, new adults into the sport, new families into the sport, we've got to become flexible. And it's taken me a long time to say that. I'll be honest with you, because I was in that group saying, no to no ad score. I hated it. When my son went to college, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to sit through these matches where they're playing no ad. Then I start talking to the college players and they're like, no, man, we love this. It gets us off the court quicker. We're playing back-to-back matches. It gives us time to recover. And, this is really good for us. And I started to kind of loosen up a little bit. I still don't like it, but I understand it. But I think, in order for the sport to grow and thrive, we've got to make room for everybody that wants to play and understand that not everybody is willing to give up their entire weekend or even an entire day of a weekend to their kid's sport. So we've got to find a way for that kid to be able to learn and play and enjoy our sport where the parents are okay with it too. That doesn't cost a fortune, that doesn't require them to take time off work, and that allows them to develop their skills to a level where they can be a very good recreational player the rest of their lives. That's the goal.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail. I think, I don't consider myself to be in the old guard group. And I know I've been in many conversations.
That's because you're way younger than me.
Well, it's because I think they take it too far sometimes.
Yeah.
And the ones I'm talking about.
I totally do.
And I'm not going to drop their names. And I know that some of them hate me. They absolutely hate me. I'll get on the groups and they're like, oh God, not Mike Baugh again. He's a pro this or pro that. I'm like, you guys don't even know me. And we agree on more things than what you want to admit. But, level 1, level 2, level 3. Yeah. Full 3rd set. Let's go. No ad scoring is out the window for them. We're playing out deuce. Level 1, level 2, level 3. Yes. But for school matches,
yeah,
like I'm kind of on the border for NCAA and NAIA and JUCO matches. Like, I'm not sure. Like, there's student athletes. Student comes first.
Yeah.
And tennis is a long, like, you can play 4-hour long matches. So what are you supposed to do? if you have a match, and some of these students are very, very smart, and they're getting degrees in biology, chemistry, engineering, and
they're working hard on their
and
academics.
they're working hard in academics. So they're supposed to play possibly for 6 hours, singles, doubles, maybe whatever. And then they have to go and do their labs.
Right. Or they're traveling. I mean, during the season, they're on the road, they're missing classes. It's tough. And I get it. I like I said, I'm still not a fan of NOAD. I understand why they're using it. The first data I saw when they first reintroduced NOAD scoring a few years ago, the time savings on the matches was really pretty minimal. And I remember, the argument when they reinstated NOAD at the collegiate level was, we got to get college tennis on TV. And the only way to get it on TV is if the matches are fit within this time window. Well, that never really happened. And until the Tennis Channel set up shop at Lake Nona. And, now we're getting some college tennis on TV, which is awesome. It's not perfect. The way they shoot it is not perfect, but it's better than nothing. And I'm happy to see it on TV and for these kids to get some recognition.
It's got to be better than, something is better than nothing, especially with college tennis. I think college tennis. So a little backstory about my affinity with college tennis is I grew up in Southern Indiana. We had Indiana State, Rose-Hulman, and just a little area that I'm from. Indiana State, Rose-Hulman, Vincennes University, Evansville, University of Southern Indiana, and IU Bloomington.
Wow.
All within an hour and a half drive. I went to the University of Evansville. We were Division I. My sophomore year, they cut the program. And also Oakland City University. How can I forget that? That's where I ended up going. So that's a lot of programs. Indiana State, Brian Bolin, who I'm sure you are well aware of.
Yeah, well,
Brian Bolin was the head coach at Indiana State before he went to Virginia and won all those national championships.
Yeah.
Indiana State was top 30 in the country. Indiana State cut their program the year after Evansville cut their program. Vincennes University was coached by Ron Albers, who is a Hall of Fame tennis coach in the ITA, won a national championship in 2011, cut their program. So there's 3 programs
Knife
right
to
there.
the heart right there. That's just awful.
3 programs right there cut. Oakland City just dropped from NCAA Division II to NAI this past year. And then luckily, Rose-Hulman, Dan Hopkins, who is the longtime coach at Rose-Hulman, just retired this past year. He just retired. USI is still going, and then IU is still going. And that is just an hour and a half there. But I had all this growing up. If I wanted to go see a college tennis match when I was 16, 17, 18, all I had to do was look at the schedule and go drive.
Yeah.
Like a half an hour or an hour, and I was at a college tennis match in the spring.
Not only going to watch, but all those college tennis players are in your backyard for you to hit with, right?
Oh, I hit with so many players.
Right.
It was so many players, and it was great. And then come to find out, it was like I meet up with these guys later, and it's just the conversations I run into these guys later on. It's small world.
Yeah.
Later on. So, but going to college tennis here right now in this kind of COVID situation, everyone's kind of looking at budgets now.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I was a victim in 2004 of the University of Evansville cutting their men's tennis team. When 2001, Kansas cut their tennis team. 2005, like I said, ISU cut their tennis team. Like, it seems like every year there's tennis team being cut after being cut.
Yeah.
What do you have? I mean, are there any sort of solutions that, I mean, like I've said like earlier, I'm a solution, not a problem. And I have talked with so many people, and we're just like hands up in the air. Like we have we cannot fix this. It's not even a leaky bucket. I mean, this bucket, there's a hole in the bottom.
Yeah.
And
no, it's a tough situation right now. And, you know, God help us if football doesn't happen in the fall. So,
if football doesn't happen.
Yeah.
God,
I mean,
tennis lives off of football.
Well, pretty much every sport lives off of football and baseball. So, basketball, sorry. And we lost basketball. So we got to have football. But it's funny because I keep saying, like, I've never paid attention to any sports other than tennis. That's all I've ever really followed. But during this pandemic, I have started following college football because it holds the fate of pretty much every other college sport in its hands. And
it's funny you say that because, you know, the Power 5 conferences, not only do they support their own programs,
right,
but they support the other programs too.
Yeah.
So in those preseason games, they pay the other schools to go beat up on them.
Yep.
And that will pay the entire athletic budget for the other schools to have these other sports.
Exactly. So we got news today that East Carolina cut both its men's and its women's team. I don't know when you're airing this, but, you know, it's interesting because there haven't been many program cuts during the COVID shutdown. And I'm really proud of college sports for really sitting tight with all of this and not making those cuts in the midst of a big crisis right now. I think that's been a really good look for college sports. I was really sad to read about East Carolina, and just because I feel like hopefully I'm wrong, but I feel like they've opened the door for other programs to now announce cuts. And I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope that's not going to happen. But you asked me what the fix is, because I'm with you. Like, if you can't offer up a solution, then just don't talk about it. It's a really tough call. And I know Tim Russell and the ITA have been working really hard to help coaches do a better job of marketing their programs in their communities, getting, you know, butts and seats at the home matches and really promoting their teams and their players, trying to make the teams so relevant to the university that the university wouldn't dare cut them, right? But I feel like it's kind of an uphill battle. Not kind of, it is an uphill battle. And I think there are so many coaches in tennis doing a great job of just that, really promoting their teams and, you know, using social media to their advantage and all those things. But because tennis is a non-revenue sport, it doesn't bring any money into the universities directly. Maybe one of the things that needs to happen, and again, ITA has really jumped on this, is highlighting how valuable the tennis alumni are to the universities and colleges. And the ITA launched an alumni network, and they are really trying to connect tennis alumni around the world and get them more involved in their colleges, and to help the colleges understand how valuable the tennis program is, not necessarily in the now, but in the future when these alums are out in the world as successful business people or professionals, or giving back to the world in terms of their work and their volunteerism, and making that university look good because of what they're doing as adults out in the world. Oftentimes, you know, we see huge donations from past tennis team members back to their universities. And so starting to highlight those types of activities is going to help, but I'm not sure if there's enough time to help enough in the midst of what we're dealing with right now with COVID-19. So we'll see.
One thing that was a big positive, and I'm not sure how much it was connected with the ITA moving to Arizona, but Arizona State reinstated its men's tennis team.
Yeah, that was huge.
They had a lot of success early on last year.
Yeah.
what do you think? I mean, do you think that more schools can start adding their teams back? I mean, do you think that's a possibility, or do you think once it's cut, it's cut?
I mean, I think we've seen over the years several schools add their programs back, and it absolutely can happen. It's all a money thing, just like everything, right? It's bottom line. So in order for the school to justify bringing a program back, somehow there has to be a benefit to the school, and whether that's a benefit in terms of money or donations or visibility, because again, the tennis alums are out doing great things in the world, and that reflects well on the college or the university. I mean, there's so many different pieces of being valuable, right? And it's going to be tough. I mean, the ITA is not a fundraising organization. There's nobody out there writing checks to these schools saying, please don't cut your program. We'll write you, $1 million check to maintain the program for another year. It just doesn't happen. There are several tennis programs out there that have private endowments, and those programs are going to be fine, right? They're going to be around in perpetuity because they've got this endowment funding them. They don't need the school's money. They've got their own money. But that's just a handful of programs.
So one thing that kind of, I don't want to say it irks me or bothers me, but they always say that they want the USTA to do something to stop, programs getting cut.
I think the USTA should be involved in that.
But one thing that I always go and think of is, if the USTA goes and stops programs from being cut, what are they doing for the programs that weren't being cut?
Well,
you know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
If you have a program that wasn't going to be cut, then why keep that program then? So now you can benefit from the USTA by cutting your program.
I mean, I don't think we're ever going to see the day where USTA comes in and writes that big check. I don't think that's happening. Yeah. But I think USTA does have a vested interest in the preservation of college tennis. I think college tennis is the carrot that draws a lot of families to the sport. That goal of earning a college scholarship, is a big carrot. And I think USTA needs to ensure the existence and the growth and the visibility of college tennis, which is why I think they're holding all these college tennis events at Lake Nona, and why they've, gotten Tennis Channel in that partnership to set up and televise those matches. They understand the importance of college tennis to the growth and the survival of the sport in this country. Whether USTA should be writing checks, I mean, I don't think that's ever going to happen, but they certainly should be advocating and, rallying the troops to fight for the preservation of these programs when they get wind. And this was a conversation I had with the ITA several years ago. When a program gets cut, when does the ITA hear about that? Do they hear about it when it's first, being discussed in the back room, or are they not hearing about it until it's a done deal? And the answer I got is no, they hear about it when it's a whisper. And, they are working behind the scenes to try and preserve these programs, but they don't have a whole lot of power in doing that. And that's why I think the USTA, either alone or in partnership with the ITA, could carry some more weight. And I mean, my God, USTA's got members in every town across the US, right? So if there's a whisper of a program on the chopping block, why wouldn't USTA send an email out to every member, in a 50-mile radius of that school and say, look, this program is in danger of getting cut. We need you to show up at those matches. We need you to write letters to the college president, to the athletic director, to whoever in the community, rally up some donations, get some money into this program, rally support for them, and save them. to me, that's something USTA could do that wouldn't really cost very much, cost a few man hours, but other than that, and I think it could have a huge impact.
I think you said it right there. I think there needs to be a stronger partnership with the ITA, because what good is the ITA if they're not going to use that partnership?
Yeah. Well, I think there is a strong partnership. I think there's a lot of overlap, but there's also a lot of headbutting. So, it's just the nature of the sport, I think.
Well, anytime you deal with the alphabet soup of tennis,
yeah,
there's so many acronyms. I mean, I talk with my wife and she's like, well, which letter are you dealing with tonight?
Yeah. Which one is that? Yeah. No, I know it's crazy, but I do think there are ways that these organizations can work better together to make a real difference. And, I hope that continues to happen. One of the things somebody said to me recently was that they thought Parenting Aces gave parents a voice at the table for junior and college tennis. And when I heard that, I took it to heart. It really hit home with me. And if that's what I can do, and by having conversations like this and talking about these ideas out loud in a public forum where hopefully somebody's going to hear it and glom on and say, hey, maybe that could work, let's try it, then it's a win. I feel real good about that.
Well, I've always been, there's a couple things. I've always said a closed mouth don't get fed. You don't know until you ask for it. And the other thing too is there's always a way to ask for things. There's always a way to go about things. If you're the guy screaming on the outside of the building, the people inside just think that you're a lunatic. Sometimes
I've been the lunatic sometimes too.
Sometimes you have to work your way inside.
Yeah.
And if you're crazy on the outside, sometimes you can't get in. And you have to be able to work your way inside, and then you can go crazy and make people listen to you.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that you're crazy and you were
no, I am. Outside, it's okay.
Whatever. But I'm crazy too. It's all good. But there's a way about going about things, and that's what I firmly believe. And the more I meet people and network with people, and I feel like my network is pretty big. I mean, we've talked with, the table of the people that we were sitting with in New York was unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
The resume there, I was in awe of all the people that we were sitting with in New York, and it was just fantastic. Yeah. And just to hear everyone's thoughts and just what we were talking about, it was great just to bounce ideas off of everyone, and with you and Dee Dee, and it's just great. And talking about Dee Dee, she wrote the USTA handbook for college recruiting. We talked a lot about college recruiting. It's hard to talk about college recruiting and not at least mention Dee Dee at least once or twice.
For sure.
And talking about Dee Dee, I wanted you to come out to Daytona this past December. If you're in the area this December, if we're still having it, I'd love to have you come out. Maybe if we're doing virtual, we can do this,
that'd be great.
Invitation for Parenting Aces and you to come and do a presentation. So
I'd love it.
That would be fantastic. But I think the more that we can get the parents educated and let them know. One thing that I do to help the USTA is I do what's called early development camps.
Mm-hmm.
And in each early development camp, it's not close to my members. It's not close to whatever. It's open. It's ran through Tennis Link, and it's in Florida. We've done it to where if you do the camp, there's also a qualifier in there where you can qualify for the state closed for either orange ball or green ball. And we put a parent education piece with that as well.
Perfect. That's perfect.
And it's great. The feedback has been phenomenal because the parents are always like, well, normally we just drop the kids off and we just kind of get ignored and we just hang out and talk to each other. Yeah. And then now, we actually have someone helping us along with things.
Right.
And it's been fantastic feedback with that and what you're doing with this too. And I feel like that we're really connecting the microphone got in the way there. I feel like we're really connecting this triangle of the parent, the coach, and the player. So Lisa, thank you for your time tonight. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm sure we could go on for another hour if we wanted to.
I know my stomach's growling though. It's dinner time here in California. So.
Oh, great. But so thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Enjoy, stay safe, stay healthy. And I'll look to talk to you soon.
Thank you, Mike. And same to you. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Take care. Have a good night, guys.
Thanks.